Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Santoro. I am the Director of Policy Research and Housing Support at the State uh, of Connecticut Department of Housing. I want to thank you all for coming to participate in our community roundtable in anticipation of the creation of our 2023-2024 action plan for housing and community development. A little bit of housekeeping. This is intended to be a conversation and engagement, so please feel free when we give you the opportunity, raise your hand. Um, uh, Come on camera if you will. If you don't want to, that's okay too. But what I will ask is identify yourself and the organization you represent when you are speaking. In the meantime, also, for the record, we'd like to know who is here. So if you can take a second and in the chat, rather than go through introductions, put your name and organization in the chat. It'll get recorded, and then we will have a record of who participated. This is part of our formal record and application to HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, in support of our action plan. So attendance and participation is important. I'll talk a little bit about what this is, about the time frame as we go forward, and then open it up for conversation. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. And I will blow it up so it's easier to read. But this is the initial conversation with our community partners on the State of Connecticut 2023-2024 Action Plan for Housing and Community Development. We anticipate submitting this to HUD on or before, well, actually, this is effective July 1. I'll talk about timetable for submission to HUD in a second. Let me go to a one-page view and blow it up. Okay, so this action plan is the fourth under the state of Connecticut's 2024 Consolidated Plan for Housing and Community Development, the 5-year plan um, that addresses Connecticut's housing and community development needs. We submit the con plan and the annual action plans to HUD in order to be eligible to receive funding under 6 specific programs in the Community Planning and Development Office of HUD. Those are CDBG, RHP, or the Recovery Housing Program, the Home Investment Partnerships Program, the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Solutions Grants, or ESG, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, or HOPWA, and finally, the National Housing Trust Fund. The program year for this action plan is July 1 of 23, running through June 30 of 24. And this plan, the con plan, identifies our priorities for that 5-year period, and this plan supports that. The annual action plan provides information on resources, activities, geographic distribution, homeless and special needs activities, other actions such as strategies to address underserved populations, foster and maintain affordable housing, remove barriers, and assist families in poverty. We have a required citizen participation plan and process that is published on the website, and this community engagement meeting is part of that citizen participation obligation. And the application includes specific forms required by HUD. I'm going to now share the timetable for this action plan. We began this process on March 16th of this month for a 15-day public comment period that ends tomorrow. Now, that being said, we will continue to take public input beyond tomorrow. But this is intended to be pre-draft. You'll also have an opportunity to comment post-draft. That is, once we receive all the comments that we have, we create the draft plan, we put it out for a 30-day public comment period, and accept both written and video testimony, both in support or contrary to that document. Public input includes 3 pre-sessions. We had a community input for the general public last week. Earlier today, we held a state roundtable where we met with our state agency partners. And this afternoon is our community roundtable where we have invited our community partners, anyone who has self-identified as a partner with the agency, as well as organizations like ConAero, the Connecticut branch of the National Association of Housing Redevelopment Officials, and the Continuum of Care to participate in this pre-draft conversation. Um, that will be completed today with additional opportunity for public comment again tomorrow. Please don't let that dissuade you. If you have ideas, comments, or written comments you would like included pre-draft, please send them to me. We expect the draft plan to be done about the middle of April. Anything you get between now and when it's actually published, we'll include and consider as part of the pre-draft. Again, you will then have, when it's published at the end of April, 30 days to comment on the actual plan. We hope to be able to have a final plan for submission to HUD on or before May 15th. That gives HUD 45 days to review and approve before the start of our program year on July 1st. So, what are we getting? Well, earlier this week, we received a notification from HUD on the amount of funds we can anticipate under those 6 programs, and they are in the table that you can see now. Is that a good size for everybody? Somebody give me a thumbs up who's on camera. Fantastic. Thank you, John. What you see before you is last year, current year, and what we expect to get for the period July 1. So under the Recovery Housing Program, we expect to get another 1.2 million. For those who don't know, CDBG RHP is a 5-year pilot program administered or launched by HUD. This will be our 3rd year coming up. At the end of that 5-year period, HUD will be looking for an evaluation of the activities carried out under RHP, and will consider whether to make it a permanent program or let it die, if you will, as a pilot. Home, which most of you I hope are familiar with, the Home Investment Partnerships Program. We have been getting around 9 million, 9.5 this year. We're actually getting almost 12 million. That's a nice $3 million boost to that program, which produces and preserves affordable housing predominantly. Small cities, CDBG, that's Community Development Block Grant Program. We are getting about 13.9 million. You can see that's been increasing slightly over the last couple of years. National Housing Trust Fund, flat funded, is what we are getting and anticipate, about 8 million. ESG, Emergency Solutions Grants, almost double what we got in the prior 2 years. HUD has begun to recognize that ESG plays an important role in not only addressing homelessness and homeless prevention, but the implementation of service programs and related activities to address homelessness overall. And finally, HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, is a very small program. We actually here in the state of Connecticut have 2 properties that we provide rental assistance to in support of that population. Okay, enough of the speechifying, if you will. We've invited you here today to talk about our current relationships, our current collaborations with you and your organizations, and to try to identify what additional priorities we are not already addressing, or ways that we can, in fact, work with you better. We think we do a pretty good job already of community engagement and targeting the use of our wide variety of federal funds. But we want your input. Now, I'm going to show you one more table, or one more set of tables, if you will. And this is everything that we do financially. And you'll see 2 categories. Anticipated state federal funding for housing, for development and housing support. You'll see that our agency gets, we anticipate receiving about $355 million for housing development and housing support next year. and state and federal funding for individual and family services, another $203 million. So roughly $5,600,000. Excuse me, $560 million uh, for use under the wide variety of programs that we have. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll try to answer it. But we'll also be opening it up. If you know how to use the raise your hand function, please feel free to use that as well. So I'm going to start a little bit of the conversation, if you will, about what. Oh, that's why, because you didn't see the chart. Now I understand. I'd stopped sharing and forgot. So the two charts I'm talking about are now up. Somebody put in the chat, can you see the chart? And I didn't put the chart up. So here is state and federal funding for housing development and housing support. Again, about 355 million. And anticipated state and federal funding for individual and family services, again, about $203 million. Okay. We want to hear from you. Again, you already know what we do with you and your organization. Are we doing okay? Are there ways that we can do what we're doing better? Or are there new initiatives that you and your organization are exploring that you believe we, the state of Connecticut Department of Housing, can assist you with? Okay. What's great about the team's function, if you raise your hand, it actually puts you in order that you raise your hand, so I don't have to worry about skipping somebody or jumping somebody. So again, I will start very quickly. Our priorities, we do not currently anticipate changing relative to these 5 programs, as well as um, some new initiatives we have coming down the pike in anticipation of the governor's budget. So real quick, RHP, we're working with CSSD, the Court Support Services Division of the Judicial Branch, to target a pilot program to help individuals coming out of DOC who also have a substance abuse problem, to help them find housing, at least until they can get on their feet, receive the support services that they need to help them to, in fact, recover and give them a leg up to get back into the community. ESG, Emergency Solutions Grant, we leverage it with ESS, state dollars, and money through through SSBG and the Department of Social Services to support our shelter system and our homeless management system overall. Again, we anticipate putting the same priorities for those funds out again this year. We will be rebidding most of those services, however, in the coming year. But our priorities do not anticipate changing unless we hear from you that we need to tweak something from a priority standpoint. The Home Investment Partnerships Program, again, we predominantly focus home on production of new units, as well as the substantial rehabilitation associated with the preservation of affordable housing across the state. We leverage it with a wide variety of state and federal resources to do that. One of those is the National Housing Trust Fund, again, federal dollars for new construction, substantial rehab. But unlike home, National Housing Trust Fund has to serve households at 30% of the area median income or below. Home can serve in some cases to up to 80% of area median income. So we use it in conjunction with our state bond dollars and National Housing Trust Fund, as well as other resources to produce communities of affordable housing. Let me be clear. We don't build projects, we build communities. We predominantly like to prioritize the creation of properties that serve extremely low, and moderate income households, ranging from 30 to 50, 60, and 80% of area median income. We also are expanding our homeownership related activities, both through the Home Investment Partnerships Program, as well as a variety of state dollars being requested by the governor's office. From a new initiative, which is out there right now, Time to Own, which helps first-time home buyers both acquire their first home and build equity over a 10-year period, all the way up to and including the production of new home ownership activities, both under the Workforce Housing Initiative as well as our existing affordable housing and state housing trust fund programs. Hopwa, we talked about very briefly. There's two projects. Nothing's really going to change. We have rental assistance subsidies to keep those two projects open and support those long-term the long-term needs of those individuals suffering from AIDS. And what program did I forget? CDBG Small Cities, Community Development Block Grant Small Cities Program, as we have in the past, is going to be focused on preservation-related activities. Unlike Home, National Housing Trust Fund, and some of the others, CDBG cannot do new construction. So it makes sense to focus it on preservation and keeping what we have. 80% of the funds under CDBG must go to housing related activities. We intend to continue that priority and that meet that federal obligation. Under CDBG small cities, we can do public infrastructure. We can do some economic development, but we do not intend to. They are not prohibited. You're not prohibited from applying under the CDBG program. Even this coming round, I believe we had our developer or our applicant meeting yesterday for municipalities. CDBG Small Cities is a municipal program. That is, the funds flow through a local municipality for administration. We don't expend those funds directly. Those of you who've used CDBG in the past know that you need to go through your municipality to access those funds. We will again be prioritizing, as I said, preservation, whether that's homeowner rehab, whether that's preservation of state or federal public housing, or other forms of existing affordable housing. Those applications will all receive priority over either public service dollars or public infrastructure, but we will consider those applications depending on the need of the municipality and the other leveraging opportunities they bring to the table. Okay, so I'm going to open the floor up to anybody who wants to comment on our existing priorities or existing plan, either in support of or make suggestions on alternative priorities that we should use these funds for. Please understand, this is predominantly about those 6 programs. You are encouraged, however, to also comment about other priorities and activities of the department. We really want to hear about what's working and what is not working as part of our planning process. Okay, don't be shy, please speak up. Just raise your hand. I will call on you, and we'll take it from there. Okay. And I see the first individual and somebody who I know and have worked with for a very long period of time. Anne Marie, please introduce yourself and then go to town.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anne Marie Perone. I'm from the Stafford Housing Authority. Thank you so much for once again including us in this discussion. So important that we be involved in this. My question is CDBG specific. My understanding is that when you apply with CDBG, and again, our town has to do that for us, we understand that. Is there any way that CDBG can be broken up? One of the things that we're finding is the grants that the town is applying for, they never really apply for the whole grant, but if they could apply with us, then maybe we could get the full grant with 2 different reasons. So for instance, they needed to do some ADA upgrades to the town hall, but they didn't need the whole chunk of change. If we had applied with them, we could have gotten the whole grant by using it for something else at the time. So we're just curious if CDBG would ever look at it that way instead.
So it can, and I will pass along the recommendation to allow that to our small cities community development block grant administrators. That is not an uncommon request to allow a community, especially those that have experience in administering CDBG, to actually split applications, that is, submit more than one in a given year, especially when you've got a large activity and a small activity like ADA improvements to the town hall. So thank you, Anne Marie. We will pass that along. So I
Thank you.
appreciate the comment.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Or please, this is not an opportunity to be quiet. This is an opportunity to speak. Christy, please introduce yourself and go to town.
Thanks, Michael. Christy Stewart. I'm with the Centers for Housing Opportunity, which is an initiative of the Housing Collective. Thank you, Michael, for inviting us. I have a question with regard to capacity building for small mission-driven developers, and where you see that falling in your programs. Is it home? Is it where you'd like to see that fall in your funding? And just a general comment that what we're finding is that there's a tremendous lack of capacity among small developers. And in our state, particularly in Fairfield County, where land costs are so tremendously high, and there isn't a lot of available land, it's typically small developers who say, look, I have a parcel here. What do I do with it? I really like it to be affordable housing, but they do not have the wherewithal to make that happen. We have a few CDCs, and that's fantastic. But how are you intending to lean in on the capacity building front for small mission-driven developers?
And thanks, Christy. And let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing right now and what I hope eventually it will lead to. We launched an initiative to invite 9 community-based not-for-profits to go through a strategic planning and technical assistance process, at the end of which they would have access to both capacity building and pre-development dollars. We started with 9, we're down to 6 who are moving forward and we're just finishing signing contracts for that capacity building and pre-development loan funding. We are hoping that works. The intent, if that pilot actually is successful, to then expand it, reach out to new additional community-based organizations. In addition, if you have an organization that qualifies as a CHODO, a community housing development organization, we have, under the Home Investment Partnerships Program, a requirement to spend at least 15% of our annual allocation on CHODOs. That is both for projects and capacity building. The only problem with using home is there's a 2-year time limit relative to that capacity building. If we give them capacity building dollars, they must have a project that we can fund within 2 years. That's hard to meet, as you well know, especially for a smaller not-for-profit. So we are hoping that on the state side, this initiative to provide capacity building dollars up front for some of these larger not-for-profits that we're working with now will open that opportunity up. So my hope is that this initial pilot is successful and that we can then in fact open it up and expand that initiative down the road. But thank you, and we share your interest and your understanding of the problem. Pam, please introduce yourself and go to town.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Ralston from the Housing Collective. So, Mike, I just have, thanks for responding to me so quickly earlier. I just want, number one, I just have a slight concern about who the information on this meeting went to and who received it, because I heard from several people this morning that they just heard it last minute that there was a meeting and they couldn't get to it. So honestly, I'm here to represent that group, and I'm not the best representative because I just really want to talk briefly about small cities, CDB small cities. And it's funding that, I believe you're familiar with, the Housing Collective, formerly Supportive Housing Works, has applied jointly with the towns of Westport and Torrington. And I don't think that anybody from those two towns are here, but I want to speak for them. The major concern is that the Small Cities has, for the past several years, has funded the CAN frontline navigation services for entry for people who are experiencing housing instability and homelessness. That has been a fragile budget item for years, because year to year, it seems like it's just not going to be funded again. I think, if I'm not wrong, that for the past couple of years and currently it's being funded by COVID funds, or sort of outside of the way it originated several years ago with small cities, CDBG small cities. So the concern is that it is a major boost to our CAN structure, infrastructure of staffing and navigation services for front end for both Westport and the greater area and Torrington. Without that funding continued, it will be a hardship for the CAN for Western Connecticut. So I just want to make sure that there is consideration for that. There's, I believe it fits under public services, and I think that's how it was funded in the past. Just really, red flagging that if that is not continued, it's a gap in our system.
I appreciate that, Pam. I appreciate the comment, and I'll deal with the involvement after I talk about the funding. My understanding is those contracts, we have another year under current contract for all of those funds. So I think we're good for 23-24.
Okay.
I believe the intent then is for the following year for us to relook at sources to continue that activity. Now, I also know that under the governor's budget, there's another $2 million that's targeted as flexible money, if you will, that's supposed to serve the coordinated access networks and the general service community overall. But I'm aware, I understand, and we agree completely that the fact that we're able to funnel the COVID money to that initiative, it's been very effective. We think it's been extremely helpful. And I will absolutely make note that if not for the current year, when those contracts expire next year, that we get some thing in place to prevent there from being a gap. With regard to the notification, we published an ad in the newspapers. We did an email blast to anyone who is on our community partners list. So if you've got an organization that didn't get a direct email notice from us, tell them to please reach out to me or Laura Watson on my staff, laura.watson@ct.gov. And we'll get them added to the community partner list so they will get an email blast directly next time. Okay?
Yes. Thank you on both, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay.
Kelly, please unmute yourself and introduce.
Hi, I'm Kelly Kraft. I'm the MMW CAN coordinator. So I wanted to just echo Pam's sentiment with the small cities. For my knowledge, our small cities contract is through Portland. It does stabilize our CAN and frontline work, our frontline diversion work. We wouldn't be able to do the work we're currently completing without that small cities. And our contracts are up December 31st, 2023. As far as I'm aware, and everything that we've been they've been extended through the COVID funding until the end of December. So we are now, looking at what CAN infrastructure will look like without that. And I know it's not just my CAN that it stabilizes. It stabilizes the entry level CAN navigation, diversion appointments for the homeless community and those about to experience homelessness. So it is essential funding moving forward on the homeless end. And the $2 million that the CANs get basically just keeps the backbone can work alive. We still struggle with that diversion, which is what small cities really helps us with. So I just wanted to share that with you.
No, I appreciate it. Again, thank you. I will pass that comment along to the small city CDBG administrator so that they can consider it as we prepare the draft plan. So this is the perfect time for both you and Pam to put it on the table. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, please introduce yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Mike. Sarah Fox, Chief Operating Officer for the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that we know that the COC and ESG dollars primarily go for rents and services. One of the big challenges we have facing providers across the state currently is the wages of our frontline staff and the need for cost of living adjustments to keep pace with inflation, as well as for operations for our providers. I know this is front of mind for many, and so I just wanted to signpost that any investments we can make in our wages for frontline staff can keep qualified staff in positions that we need, as well as we're trying to keep doors open across the state, and every dollar is key. I also put strong support in for what Pam and Kelly brought forward.
Sarah, thank you very much. And yeah, staffing, maintaining qualified, experienced staff. I think I'll speak for the state and my department. It's a real nightmare right now. So I understand the concern, and we will make sure that we keep that in mind as we move forward. So thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate it. You have something else you want to add? Oh, you're still muted, Sarah.
Sorry, I would just add that I know that they're digging in on this at the national level and the HUD is looking into it. I think bringing it in and really thinking about how we can better implement these cost of living adjustments statewide is really key and will be instrumental for frontline providers.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, and some of it comes down to timing. Timing's great sometimes, and timing sucks sometimes. Right now we're in the and I think everybody who's in the rental market understands the market is moving faster than HUD can keep up relative to its limits, its program requirements, et cetera. We're trying to get ahead of that, and wages for frontline staff is part of that lag as well. So I thank you for putting it on the table and emphasizing the conversation. Anybody else? Please don't be shy. Everybody else is happy with our priorities and our con plan, with our interaction with you guys. Christy, you're up again.
Sorry, I have one more thing.
No, please.
Which is, as you well know, because you supported the data. As we look at data, we see that 30% of all affordable units going forward are going to need to be accessible, so to those with mobility disabilities. And I just want to flag that, and I know that you know that, Michael, but I hope to see that bumped up in terms of priorities for the state as we adjust to an aging population in the state of Connecticut and get ready for what's coming.
Thanks, Christy. And yeah, you actually raised 2 points with that. And let me clarify. We have an aging population here in the state of Connecticut. And the needs of that aging population is going to continue to grow. And those are unique needs. They're specific needs, which are not necessarily the same as the general disabled population, who also is growing and has increasing need. Right now, the requirement is 10% of anything that we build is handicapped accessible. We encourage our developers to do more when it is possible. So I appreciate the comment and the sentiment. And as you said, I've seen the data, so we're well aware. But thank you, Christy, very much for putting it out there. Any other comments in advance of our draft? Colleen, please introduce yourself, your organization.
Hi, good afternoon. Colleen Lauer, I'm the director at Ledyard Housing Authority. I did get the invite to this meeting back early in March, and I wasn't sure if I was really supposed to be in here because we are a SSHP property. So my question is, I know we had spoken back at Conero about vouchers. When this place was built in '86, it was whether it was set up to be a low income property or it was just assumed by the tenants to be a low income property and the director, we are affordable housing. And we're just having a hard time getting there. So I wanted to just kind of check and see if there was any movement on the financial help for us.
Sure. And outside of the 6 programs that we're talking about here, what Colleen is talking about is the state is moving down the road on trying to do some project basing of its federal Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. We modified our administrative plan. We hope to move that initiative forward through a variety of avenues or phases. Phase 1 is HUD allows us to do project basing without a competitive process if a project has received funding under a competitive process within the last 3 years. That list is just about complete. The folks running the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program will be reaching out to those properties that potentially qualify and be offering them an opportunity to do some project basing. The SSHP portfolio for those projects that have received CDBG funds in the last 3 years are part of that initiative. So if you are one of those, they'll be reaching out to you. A further initiative or phase 2 down the road, which we hope to get into later this summer, is to actually do a request for proposals for projects to seek PBV placement in their properties. That is a competitive process under the HUD regulations, and we're working on the details for putting that RFP out. So Colleen, I'm going to ask, did you get CDBG in the last 3 years?
Yes, so we were awarded in December of 2020. It's been a very long process, but I am happy to report that they started about a week and a half ago, just installing mini splits. So we actually have a construction trailer and a Connex box, and we're happy to finally see some movement.
So you would be on our short list to contact under that initial phase for
Awesome.
participation. So keep your eyes and ears open over the next, I want to say, 2 to 4 weeks. You should be getting something. Okay.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Mr. Griffin, if you'd please introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you for inviting us. I'm Neil Griffin. I'm the Executive Director of the Glastonbury Housing Authority. And a lot of local elected leaders have been kind of reaching out and having conversations with us, and they're just kind of curious in the housing production dollars that are available. Is there a factor evaluated when you have communities where there's a desire or a need, like even under 830G, to have an increased affordable housing production there? If there's a community that through their affordable housing plan has changed policies, zoning, or even made hard dollar contributions to the increase of affordable housing, is that factored into the consideration on the spending for those housing production dollars? I just didn't have an answer for them on that. And that's kind of just, if it's not out there, just for consideration when you move forward on things.
I appreciate that, Neil. And right now, and this is a rare situation, right now we got so much affordable housing resources that if you've got a viable project, we want to talk to you. For those of you who are not aware or don't follow the development engagement process, it basically is creating a pipeline of eligible projects. And it really then comes down to whether you move your project forward or not. We have only said no to 2 projects over the last 3 years, and they were predominantly because the cost per unit was in excess of $600,000. So if you've got a good viable project, we want to talk, and we got money for you. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Neil. Thanks. Anne Marie, you're up.
Hey, Michael. Just a question about pre-development monies. Is there another resource for pre-development monies for those projects?
Right. So right now, we're not prioritizing putting out pre-dev money. We have pre-dev in hand. It's going out in conjunction with the development engagement process, depending on where a project is in its life cycle in terms of its planning process. I'm aware of your particular property's needs. I have had conversations up the chain with it. Right now, um, I don't know why. That project of yours is not one that's high on the commissioner's list at the moment. But it's on the list for consideration. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just curious if there was any other resource for pre-dev monies. Okay, thank you.
No problem, Anne Marie. Thank you. Anybody else? Comments, questions? Please don't be shy. Matthew Straub. Mr. Straub, please introduce yourself, your organization, and go to town.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me? I'm on some
Yes.
headphones right now. Excellent. My name is Matt Straub. I'm the Senior Program Officer for Lending and Investments with LISC. One of the questions I had, and it may not actually be relevant specifically to this call, but as part of the state's planning around its resources to support development, is there going to be a change in the state bond funding limit of 100,000 per unit or 4 million per project, given the changes in construction costs and interest rates?
So those aren't limits; those are targets. That starts the conversation. The DEP process, the development engagement process, really lays out and allows us to consider your project as an individual project. As a starting point, because people have asked, what are we looking for relative to subsidizing an affordable housing unit? We're currently looking at $100,000 to $125,000 per unit. However, we are funding higher than that in projects based on need, both specific to the increase in costs of materials and labor that we're seeing, as well as what's happening in the banking market, where interest rates are rising and a project's ability to leverage private dollars is being negatively affected. So you come in the door, if your target's 100 to 125 and then you can't meet it, we will continue the conversation. So we have funded substantially higher than $100,000 or $125,000 per affordable unit. And we'll continue to do that, but on an individualized basis. I hope that
Okay,
answers your question, Matt.
Looking at the DEP requirements and instructions for fall 2022, it does specifically use the word limit. And as a pre-development and acquisition underwriter, it makes it difficult for us to evaluate what's reasonable if the state is not more forthcoming about its willingness to go higher than that number.
I appreciate that, Matt. Yeah, we have, and we continue to go higher than that. But I appreciate the comment. I will make sure that with the next DEP, which I think is going out next week, please don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure that notice is going out. I will see if I can get them to modify the language so that it's not a limit, it's a target.
Excellent.
Okay?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Gottlieb, please introduce yourself and who you represent.
John Gottlieb, Ripple Corporation, and Charter Oak Communities. And I just want to mention that what you just said about the $4 million not being a limit is 100% in conflict with what Miguel Rivera told us when we were putting together the DEP and the tax credit applications for our Oak Park Phase 1 project, which is in the 9% right now. We were told 4 million is the absolute maximum. If you need more, you can get it from another source, but that's an additional complicated piece that involved other activities. So the subconscious advice was stick to the 4 million cap, you're going to be better off. And that's what we did. And so we have over $2 million of our own sponsor money in that budget now, exactly as a result of being told that that was not effectively a limit. So I would just join Matt in saying it would really be good if there could be some clarity, because if we're lucky enough to get funded, that being represented as a limit, it's going to cost me a lot of money.
And thank you, John, and I appreciate the comment. You're talking specifically about the 9% low-income housing tax credit round, for
Right.
those folks who are listening to the conversation, and that's a direct result of a negotiation between DOH and CHAFA, specific to the 9% round.
Okay.
So I understand. Once a project gets awarded under the 9% round, I'll say it this way, things change. Okay. So if you were to get awarded or as your project moves forward, those conversations continue.
Oh,
Okay.
well, thank you. Thank you for that guidance. I appreciate it.
No problem. Mitzi, please introduce yourself and go to town.
I just have a quick question.
Can you introduce yourself for the folks, Mitzi?
I'm sorry.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
sorry. My name is Mitzi Rowe. I'm the CEO for the Bristol Housing Authority. Hello, everyone. And I just wanted to know if this funding was only for state programs, no federal programs.
So which funding are you talking about, Mitzi?
Um, I thought we were talking about funding for pre-development.
Okay, well, today's conversation is about the Consolidated Plan for Housing and Community Development, the annual action plan that supports that, and the 6 primary programs that are the community planning and development programs, those federal programs. On a peripheral note, they're also talking about how that impacts some of our other funding streams. But the primary conversation is again about those 6. If you're talking about in general about the department's programs and resources, all of our money is going out through the DEP, the development engagement process. So if you have a project and you have not yet submitted, when the DEP opens again, I think in the next, the notice I think goes out in the next week, please take the opportunity to submit information on your project through the DEP. You will get on and start a conversation relative to our pipeline for activity. And if that means you have a need for pre-development funds, it'll depend on the specifics of your project, whether the department would be interested in providing those pre-development dollars. And no, it's not limited to state units or federal units. It's the DEP is about affordable housing, whether that's a preservation activity, new construction, substantial rehab, or something else you have in mind. I hope that
Okay, thank
answers
you
your
very
question.
much.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mitzi. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Sarah, you're up again. You muted again, Sarah.
Sorry, I have dogs. With the increase in ESG funds, does the department have any plan? I mean, I obviously know you're hosting this, but are there any plans in sight for that increase?
Hang on 1 second. Let me throw that back up so everybody can see the chart that you're talking about. Right. So ESG, we're actually getting an extra $1 million this year from the federal government, which we were both extremely pleasantly surprised at. My understanding is that we're going to be rebidding the shelter contracts. So it will depend in large part on what we get. We expect a lot of it to go to, as you had mentioned earlier, just flat out increased costs due to salary. But we're hoping for some expansion as well. That will be leveraging, again, the governor proposed $2 million in a more flexible pot targeted to homeless prevention and diversion. We're also looking at other sources and initiatives through other state resources to try to help bolster the homeless system. We are looking under rocks and turning over every stone to see what we can do, and because we all recognize what we saw during COVID and our ability to non-congregate, that is, move people out of shelters into even a more temporary housing situation was beneficial. We're trying to find ways to continue to do that and move it forward. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Julie, thank you. Julie Ackerman, please unmute yourself. And
Hi, this is
go to
Julie
town.
from CRT in Hartford. I just want to follow up on that last conversation. A lot of the shelter operating budgets have not seen an increase in many years, so we're welcoming the additional dollars that are coming into the state for ESG services. And we do understand that they are going to be put out to rebid, but our personnel costs and operating costs have increased tremendously over the last several years. We're struggling to keep staff as well because of those dollars being so limited. And we're struggling to have enough resources to meet the increased needs of the certain clients that we serve. So we support the dollars going to support operating costs at the shelters.
Appreciate that. And we will pass that along to the individual and family folks who run ESG, ESS, administer the SSBG dollars as well. So thanks. Appreciate the comments. Anybody else? Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Just one more small statement.
Please.
I mean, obviously, when you talk about the governor's $2 million proposed for flexible funding and the need that we're seeing on the ground, we've seen an increase in elderly people coming into our system. We know that flexible funding and prevention funding is key, as is flexible funding for diversion and for rapid exit. All of those dollars are really helpful when we have a system which is really bogged down by the fact that there's not enough affordable housing or units available at this time. I would just ask that those key interventions be considered in this plan as you move forward, commiserate with the need seen in the cans.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. And for those of you who don't know, we've got about 4,000 units under construction now. We anticipate coming online in the current calendar year, and another 3,800 in the works. That is, we're working on final underwriting and hope to get those projects and units to close in the current calendar year. So that'd be almost 8,000 total units over the next year and a half, or about 18 months or so. At the same time, through the DEP, we're building a pipeline of projects, some of which will move faster than others. But as I said at the top, we have a lot of housing resources right now for production. We are committed to getting those dollars out the door as quickly as we can. So if you have a project, we want to hear about it through the DEP. And the faster you can move, then the faster we want to get your project funded. So thank you. Christy.
Okay, I promise I won't say anything after this, but I just want to publicly say that it would be so great if the Department of Housing could set hard unit targets for production and preservation, so that we could keep track of those and our progress against them moving forward.
Well, when you say hard targets, you mean by location, as opposed to in general.
Mean, how many units at what AMI?
Oh, we have that. Oh, I can tell you what our current pipeline consists of. We can tell you where we're going. I mean, I will tell you now, our department's priority are 30 to 50% of AMI units. And that's where we're putting the majority of our resources. But we are building communities. We want to make sure we do get a breadth of income groups when we build a project. Okay. But I can tell you where we're at now in terms of what's under construction.
Yeah, because it would be nice for us to be able to say, right, as a state, we're committing to building whatever 8,000 units over the next 2 years, so that we can look back and see how we do with that target.
Oh, again, we're going to build as many units as we can with every dollar that we have. So putting a target on a unit count, I'll say it this way: you're pouring a bucket into the bathtub. We just want to get units. We need units in all income bands, and that's why the governor's commitment or request to provide $100 million for what people are calling workforce housing, which is serving populations between 60 and 120% of AMI, is a critical component because producing those units also frees up other units in the marketplace. A lot of people talk about elderly as well and miss the fact that we do in fact need to build more elderly housing in some population areas, because what it does is it frees up other housing that is currently being used in an overhoused situation, i.e., I got a big house that could house a family, but I've got one elderly person trying to live in and maintain that home, who would be better served in a smaller unit in a rental opportunity, to make that unit available for a young family or a moderate income household. So we need units at all income levels, but I appreciate the comment, Christy. Okay. Who is up next? Matt, you're up.
Hi, Mike. One follow-up question. Sorry to keep lingering
No.
on this one topic.
Yep.
One of the things we're seeing developers try and do is create operational efficiency through the development of larger communities with more qualified units. So if a developer were to come with a community of something like 80 qualified units, is the state still willing to fund that at the 100 to 125,000 per qualified unit level?
Yes, absolutely.
Great,
So
fantastic.
that's why I say what John was talking about was specifically for the 9% low-income housing tax credit round. We had
Yep.
set some limits on what we were going to consider under the 9% round. But as those applications go through the bid process, as other funding gets more firmed up, what we have seen over the last 3 years, thanks to COVID predominantly, we have seen gaps pop up and grow. And we are dealing with those on a case-by-case basis.
Great.
So as far as the DEP goes, though, if you target $100,000 to $125,000 a unit in your ask as a starting point, we're going to look at you, talk about your project, and be very interested as we go forward. But then we do continue to be flexible, both in terms of our state and federal resources and layering of those opportunities. Again, as we look at providing more deep income targeted units while still creating a community. Anne Marie.
Sorry, I won't bother you after this, I promise. I just wanted to comment on the fact that, Michael, I agree with you so much on the senior housing. But I also wanted to say that it's very difficult to build affordable senior housing, especially for our 25 percenters, when we're not in the cities, when we're not in a transportation corridor.
Yep.
It's very difficult to build a 4% tax credit property and be able to call it affordable for your 25 percenters, which tend to be your seniors who are on a fixed Social Security income. The 9% works fantastic. We're able to get 25 percenters in there, 50 percenters, 60s, even markets. So I know 9% is very competitive, but it's not anything that senior housing in the suburban areas can even think about applying for anymore, because we're not even part of the conversation. And I just think that, maybe that needs to change.
I appreciate that. Hear that, Anne Marie. And our intent is, once we get the initial PBV initiative off the ground, eventually we hope to issue an RFP, which could include new units as part of that request. That is going to be down the road, though. But probably within the next year, you'll be seeing a request for proposals from us to do some project basing with our Section 8s.
We'll be
Okay.
here.
I'm sure you will. So we are at time, but I want to make it clear. The formal contact or comment period for the pre-draft is tomorrow. But if you get me comments next week, say before Good Friday even, we'll be happy to consider them and include them in the pre-draft. You will then, once a draft is created, get a 30-day public comment period and additional public opportunities to comment on that draft plan. Okay? This is not your one and only. This is only the first opportunity to input. Okay? Please When the draft comes out, though, look at it, digest it, understand it, and give us real concrete comment and opinion on the plan itself. All the notes for today will be taken. We will do our best to incorporate them in the draft plan, understanding your needs, your comments, and what you're talking about, not just specifically for the 6 programs covered by the action plan, but for the department overall. I want to thank you all for your interest and your participation today. I will reiterate one more time. If you have an organization or an entity that wants to participate specifically in our community engagement processes, have them send me their email address for inclusion on the community partners list. You'll get added anytime we do a email blast on participation or notices of funding availability and that kind of thing. You will be included in that distribution. Okay. This recording will get posted eventually on the department's website as well for future reference. So again, I thank everybody for your time and your participation. Have a great day. Please stay safe.
Thanks, Mike.